Hi, Utinyu will cost you 20, but Yubnub, it's going to cost you a little more. Andrew, and this is Katie's Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, we're going to be going back to Star Wars, but very much that sort of post-Return of the Jedi era that kind of really bucks the expectation that, if a Star Wars product hits, within 10 to 15 years, maybe some nostalgia goggles will kick in and, fans will reevaluate it. Not so here. So let's just get right into Ewoks, the animated series. Ewoks generally are a bit of a touchy subject for particularly Gen X or elder millennial fans of Star Wars. Of course, as you know, they were first introduced in Return of the Jedi as sort of the stand-in of what would have been Wookiees in the original script. They were, essentially an allegory of, sort of nature fighting back against the, industrialization of the Empire and, taking it down with good old, gumption and know-how. Nevertheless, what they were was very apparent. I mean, as much as George Lucas sort of kind of changed his tune and sort of tried to take it away from Vietnam War story in the first movie to a much more family-friendly affair by Return of the Jedi. I mean, even as kids, even prior to the internet, we understood what a cynical corporate cash grab these little bears were. Nevertheless, George Lucas was convinced they were going to be the next big thing. They were the Jar Jar before Jar Jar Binks. So he had essentially, two made-for-TV movies around the Ewoks produced that I might come back to. I'm really hesitant to. I don't want to watch them again. Likewise, he did sort of make sure that a cartoon series was also in the works, and that was, Ewoks, which was done in conjunction with Droids, both being done by Canadian studio Latara. The premise of the cartoon is pretty simple and not, dissimilar to likewise sort of gender-neutral, cuddly, collectible style cartoons like, Care Bears or Snort. Essentially, it was about Wicket, the main Ewok we met in Return of the Jedi, his family, the wider village, and the wider world of Endor. It really does build out that there were other species like the Duloks or the Witch Morag, who we'll talk about more later. But very much, just sort of little family dramas, little, threats to the village, little bears with big problems. Amidst all the families, all the moms, all the sisters, all the villains, there is quite a large female cast of Ewoks in the show, but I'm really going to focus on, especially I'd say like the big players, who would probably be, most deserving of a toyline, which we'll get back to. The first, of course, being Princess Kneesaa. She would be the youngest daughter of Chief Chirpa, who was likewise a pretty, named character in Return of the Jedi, as well as getting his own figure in the Kenner line. She was, I would say, arguably the next co-star behind Wicket in the series. I mean, she was someone very memorable, and very much, a token princess character of the time, where she was, strong and independent, but got in trouble too much, very, very paint by numbers, but very memorable nevertheless. The second would be Latara, who was Kneesaa's best friend. I wouldn't say there's a lot of characterization there. She was very much, musically inclined. She had a feather in her hat that made her look like a flapper. I mean, she took care of her brothers and sisters, had a crush on Tebow. There's not a lot there, really. And there's not really, it shouldn't be expected much of her. The last character would be a, character called Morag, who was a witch who lived on Endor and was really sort of the evil counterpoint to Chief Logray. Again, someone from the Return of the Jedi movie. She was, a pretty big deal. I mean, I would say alongside the Duloks, who were sort of another kind of rival species on Endor, Morag was really kind of, just that bad bitch who just, made trouble, and really did get her comeuppance at the end if you ever watched the whole thing. Now, onto the toys. Ewoks, like droids, had one wave of toys out. Droids seemed to actually, fare pretty well with character selection. Of course, there was a lot to fill in wave 2, but I mean, they really had a great battle plan. Ewoks was a real strange one, where they made a handful of Ewoks and then a bunch of Duloks. And I think conventional wisdom assumes that Kenner kind of looked at this and said, well, if we put out all the Ewoks again after just doing so a year or so prior, will parents buy these, or are they just going to be more concerned about buying brand new characters that were made for the show? I mean, and as a child who had bought quite a few of these at the time, I can confirm that my mom was like, I'm not buying another Wicket, I'm not buying another Logray, I'm not buying nothing. You can get the Dulocs. And the Dulocs I had, at the very least, much like droids, there was one woman in the first wave. That would be Lady Gorniche, the queen of the Dulocs. She's a great character. She's just the weirdest Star Wars figure you can imagine. They all are, frankly, but I mean, just wow. Like droids, the first wave did not really sell very well, so the line was canceled. That said, of course, we have seen what Wave 2 would have looked like, and again, there's a bit of a problem here, where I mean, they had a few more Ewoks, some other bigger Ewok-ish guy. At least they would have had Morag in there. But again, you had like Princess Kneesaa was really, I would say, one of the breakout stars of this little, corner of the Star Wars galaxy. And it was really kind of strange to see her mission as A, a brand new character, and B, a real headliner for the series to be excluded. This is often the part of the video where I cry foul and sexism and said, Kenner purposely didn't give us Kneesaa. That's not true. They actually did make both Wicket and Kneesaa in the stuffed teddy bear, essentially, toys that they made for kids, one for the brother, one for the sister. So they were very much, aware of what they had here, in the sense that, Ewoks were a very kind of gender-neutral, younger sliding kind of toy line. Likewise, they had another, Ewok treehouse, family hut, almost kind of like toddler toy, play set that likewise had Kneesaa in it. So the fact that she was excluded from the line that probably would have made the most money, even though it didn't, is a really strange choice. Funnily enough, while editing, me and the dog actually found out that there was some figures that were prototyped for both Kneesaa and Latara for the Ewoks line. Likely, to be in Wave 3 had the line succeeded, which, as we can already tell, George Lucas had intended. To be fair, they look great. Not quite on model. I mean, Kneesaa's cape is a little short. Kneesaa doesn't quite have the right hair, but a great first stab. And it's one of those things where it's really too bad that they weren't made. Although it's, very good, concept art for, let's say, 3D modelers to take care of later. So the final verdict here is a bit of a strange one. In terms of the characters themselves, they have, been canonized, we'll say. They are considered part of Star Wars canon, both before the Disney buyout and after. So they've certainly all made appearances and, have factored into like different medias, be it comics or books or video games even. But really, I mean, Kneesaa, once again, is probably the real standout here. She would have been, I would say, officially canonized on screens in the Forces of Destiny YouTube series, where there was basically a bunch of short commercials, essentially, for the Forces of Destiny's doll line. Kneesaa would eventually get a figure in 2012 as part of the Movie Heroes series, a Toys R Us exclusive. She's likewise much more recently come out in a 2-pack with Wicket, so I mean, she's definitely gotten some plastic presents. In terms of, if you want the vintage style figures, you might have to go for some more custom roots in that regard. That said, I mean, as I sort of mentioned at the top, Gen X, we never really came back around to these. I mean, as much as, say, the holiday special has sort of gotten a new look, a new, kind of nostalgia for, droids and Ewoks have not. So Hasbro every now and then does sort of, homages or what have you, but when it comes to their retro collection, I don't think they're going to touch this at all. So until I touch those horrible movies, that's it for Ewoks, at least this week. Thank you for watching, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, all those YouTubey things, and I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.